The salt air hit Lieutenant Sarah Chen's face as she stepped off the transport helicopter onto the deck of the USS Valor. The massive destroyer cut through the Pacific waves like a knife through butter, its steel hull gleaming under the morning sun. Sarah adjusted her tactical gear and checked her watch. 0600 hours. Right on time. She had been pulled from her regular SEAL Team 6 operations just 12 hours ago. The call came directly from Admiral Harrison himself, which meant this was no ordinary mission. Sarah's reputation preceded her. She was the only female operator to complete SEAL training without recycling, and her record in counter-terrorism operations was spotless. But this assignment felt different. The briefing room was already full when Sarah entered. Marine Corps Colonel Marcus Webb stood at the front, his weathered face serious as he studied satellite photos spread across the table. Around the room sat 8 Marines from Force Reconnaissance, their eyes turning to assess the newcomer. Sarah felt their skeptical gazes but kept her expression neutral. She had dealt with doubt before. "Lieutenant Chen," Colonel Webb nodded. "Glad you could join us. Take a seat." Sarah moved to an empty chair, noting how the Marines shifted slightly to make room. Their body language spoke volumes, professional courtesy mixed with uncertainty about working with a Navy SEAL, especially a female one. "Gentlemen, and lady," Webb began, "what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. 3 days ago, our intelligence sources confirmed that Viktor Petrov, arms dealer and war criminal, will be moving a shipment of stolen military hardware through the port of Caracas, Venezuela. The shipment includes advanced targeting systems, encrypted communication equipment, and enough weapons to arm a small army." Sarah leaned forward, studying the photos Webb displayed on the overhead screen. The port facility looked heavily fortified, with multiple security checkpoints and what appeared to be private military contractors patrolling the perimeter. "The Venezuelan government has been turning a blind eye to Petrov's operations in exchange for a cut of the profits," Webb continued. "Our diplomatic channels are useless here. We need to go in, secure the shipment, and extract it before it reaches its final destination, a terrorist cell operating in the Middle East." Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, a stocky Marine with kind eyes, raised his hand. "Sir, what's our insertion method? That facility looks locked down tight." Webb clicked to the next slide, showing a detailed layout of the port. "This is where things get interesting. Petrov's operation runs like clockwork. Every Tuesday at midnight, they move high-value cargo from Warehouse 7 to a waiting cargo ship. The transfer takes exactly 43 minutes. That's our window." Sarah studied the warehouse layout, her mind already calculating angles of approach and potential escape routes. "What about civilian casualties, sir? Port workers, security guards who might just be doing their jobs?" "Good question, Lieutenant," Webb replied. "Intelligence suggests most of the overnight security consists of Petrov's own people, former military contractors with blood on their hands. But we treat everyone as potentially innocent until proven otherwise. Rules of engagement are tight on this one." Corporal Jackson, a tall Marine with nervous energy, spoke up. "Sir, why the mixed unit? No disrespect to the lieutenant, but we usually operate with our own people." Webb's expression grew stern. "Because this isn't a usual operation, Corporal. The warehouse's security system includes biometric scanners, pressure-sensitive floors, and thermal imaging. We need someone who can navigate those systems while the rest of the team handles the physical security. Lieutenant Chen specializes in electronic warfare and infiltration. She's the best we have." Sarah felt the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. It wasn't the first time she had been the only woman in a room full of skeptical men, and it wouldn't be the last. But each mission was a chance to prove herself again, to show that her gender had nothing to do with her ability to complete the task. "The plan is simple in concept, complex in execution," Webb continued. "We insert via submarine 12 miles off the coast. 2 Zodiac boats will take us to separate landing points. Team Alpha, Rodriguez, Jackson, Williams, and Torres will create a diversion at the main gate. Team Bravo, myself, Chen, Murphy, and Santos will infiltrate the warehouse and secure the shipment." Sarah nodded, appreciating the straightforward approach.
Complicated plans had too many variables, too many things that could go wrong.
She had learned that lesson the hard way during her first deployment in Afghanistan. "What about extraction, sir?" asked Sergeant Murphy, a redhead with sharp blue eyes.
"Once we have the shipment, we rendezvous at the secondary landing site.
The Zodiacs will take us back to the submarine, and we're home free.
Total mission time, 4 hours from insertion to extraction." Webb closed his folder and looked around the room. "Questions?"
Sarah raised her hand.
"Intelligence on Petrov himself? Will he be on site?" "Negative.
Our sources indicate he'll be in Moscow during the transfer.
His lieutenant, Alexei Volkov, will be overseeing the operation. Former Spetsnaz, highly dangerous.
If we encounter him, consider him a high-value target." The briefing continued for another hour, covering contingency plans, communication protocols, and individual assignments.
Sarah found herself impressed by the Marines' professionalism.
They asked good questions and seemed to genuinely listen to her input when she suggested modifications to the infiltration route. After the formal briefing ended, the team moved to the armory to select weapons and equipment. Sarah chose her usual loadout, an $416 Hong Kong dollars assault rifle with suppressor, a Glock 19 sidearm, and various electronic devices for bypassing security systems. The familiarity of preparing her gear helped calm her pre-mission nerves.
"First time working with Marines?"
Sergeant Rodriguez asked as he cleaned his rifle nearby.
"Yes," Sarah replied, checking her weapons optics. "You?" "First time with a SEAL. Heard you people are crazy." Sarah smiled. "Only the good ones." Rodriguez chuckled. "Fair enough.
Listen, some of the guys might give you a hard time at first.
It's nothing personal. We just like to stick with what we know." "I understand.
Trust is earned, not given."
"Exactly.
But, for what it's worth, your reputation speaks for itself.
The colonel wouldn't have requested you specifically if he didn't think you could handle it." Sarah appreciated the gesture. Building rapport with the team would be crucial for mission success.
She had learned that lesson during her early days in the SEALs, when she had to prove herself to every new team she joined. That evening, as the ship continued its journey toward the Venezuelan coast, Sarah found herself on deck watching the sunset.
The Pacific stretched endlessly in all directions, its surface painted gold and orange by the dying light.
These quiet moments before a mission were precious, a chance to center herself mentally and emotionally.
"Mind if I join you?"
Colonel Webb's voice came from behind her.
"Not at all, sir." Webb moved to stand beside her at the rail. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, watching the waves.
"You know," Webb said finally, "when Admiral Harrison suggested you for this mission, I had my doubts. Not about your abilities, your service record speaks for itself. But about how you'd fit with my Marines."
Sarah waited, sensing he had more to say. "I've been in the Corps for 22 years. I've seen a lot of changes, not all of them easy.
But, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that good operators come in all shapes and sizes. What matters is whether you can do the job when lives are on the line."
"I appreciate that, sir.
The truth is, we need you on this mission. Those security systems aren't going to crack themselves, and Petrov's people won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way. I need to know my team can count on you when things go sideways."
Sarah met his gaze directly. "They can, sir.
I didn't make it through SEAL training by backing down when things got tough."
Webb nodded, seeming satisfied. "Good. Get some rest, Lieutenant.
Tomorrow we start final preparations, and, the day after that, we go to work." As Webb walked away, Sarah returned her attention to the ocean. Tomorrow would bring weapons checks, final briefings, and last-minute adjustments to the plan. The day after would bring action, danger, and the chance to prove once again that she belonged among the military's elite units. The mission ahead would test not just her technical skills, but her ability to work seamlessly with a team that didn't know her. She thought about the warehouse they would infiltrate, the security systems she would need to defeat, and the lives that hung in the balance.
Somewhere in the Middle East, terrorists were waiting for those weapons. Her job was to make sure they never received them. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo of her sister's children, her nephew Marcus and niece Emma. They were the reason she did this job, the reason she pushed herself to excel in a field dominated by men. Every mission was about protecting people like them from those who would do them harm. The next morning brought intensive preparation. Sarah spent hours reviewing building schematics and security protocols, memorizing every detail of the warehouse layout. She studied surveillance footage of previous operations at the port, noting patrol patterns and timing. The Marines practiced immediate action drills and rehearsed their diversion tactics. During a brief break, Corporal Jackson approached her hesitantly. "Lieutenant, can I ask you something?" "Sure. How do you deal with the pressure? I mean, being the only woman and all. Doesn't it get to you?" Sarah considered the question carefully. It was one she had been asked many times over the years, and she had learned to give honest answers without revealing too much vulnerability. "The pressure is real," she said. "But I learned early on that I can't control what other people think. I can only control my performance. Every mission, every training exercise, every interaction is a chance to prove that gender doesn't determine capability." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense. I have 2 sisters, and they're both tougher than most guys I know. I guess I never really thought about what it would be like for them in a job like this." "The military is changing," Sarah replied. "Slowly, but it's changing. Your sister's daughters might have opportunities we can only dream of right now." That afternoon brought the final briefing. Intelligence had provided updated satellite imagery showing increased security around the warehouse. Petrov's people were clearly expecting trouble, though whether they knew specifically about the planned raid remained unclear. "We stick to the plan," Webb announced. "Increased security just means we need to be more careful, not more aggressive. Remember, our objective is the shipment, not a body count." Sarah appreciated the reminder. In her experience, the best operations were often the ones where minimal force was required. Violence should always be a last resort, not a first option. As night fell and the ship moved into position off the Venezuelan coast, Sarah completed her final equipment checks. Every piece of gear had been tested and retested. Her electronic devices were fully charged, her weapons were zeroed, and her mind was focused on the task ahead. The submarine rendezvous point was still 12 hours away, but already she could feel the familiar pre-mission energy building within the team. The Marines had accepted her presence, and she had proven herself during the preparation phase. Now it was time to see if that acceptance would hold under fire. Sarah made her way to the communications center to send a final message to her family. The encrypted email was brief but heartfelt, expressing her love without revealing any operational details. Her parents had learned not to ask too many questions about her deployments, understanding that some things had to remain classified. Later that night, as she lay in her bunk listening to the ship's engines, Sarah ran through the mission plan one final time. Tomorrow night, she and 8 Marines would infiltrate one of the most secure facilities in South America, steal a shipment of weapons worth millions of dollars, and escape before anyone realized what had happened. It was the kind of mission that could make careers or end them. Success would mean preventing those weapons from reaching terrorists. Failure could mean capture, international incident, or worse. But Sarah had faced similar odds before and prevailed. This mission would be no different. The female SEAL closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, using techniques learned during her years of training. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, she needed rest and mental preparation. In less than 24 hours, she would discover whether the Marines' acceptance of her abilities would survive contact with the enemy. The submarine's hull cut through the dark Caribbean waters like a silent predator. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of diving as the vessel descended to its operational depth, 12 miles off the coast of Venezuela. The USS Phantom was one of the Navy's newest attack submarines, specifically designed for covert insertion operations. In the cramped preparation bay, 9 warriors made final adjustments to their gear. The Marines had transformed from skeptical colleagues into focused professionals,
their earlier doubts replaced by pre-mission intensity. Sarah appreciated the shift. Doubt had no place in combat operations. Colonel Webb checked his watch and addressed the team.
Final intelligence update.
Our sources confirm the shipment arrived at Warehouse 7 approximately 2 hours ago. Security is tight, but following expected patterns. Weather conditions are optimal: new moon, minimal cloud cover, sea stay calm. Sarah secured her diving gear and ran through her mental checklist one final time. The plan was solid, but she knew from experience that no plan survived first contact with the enemy unchanged. Flexibility and quick thinking would be crucial.
Lieutenant Chen, Webb called out.
Walk us through the electronic security one more time. Sarah moved to the small briefing board mounted on the bulkhead.
The warehouse uses a layered security system.
Perimeter sensors detect movement within 50 meters. Door and window sensors trigger if opened without proper codes. Internal motion detectors cover all main corridors. The real challenge is the vault area where they store high-value items. She pointed to a schematic of the building's interior. Pressure-sensitive floors, thermal imaging cameras, and biometric scanners. But every system has weaknesses.
The thermal cameras reset every 30 minutes for calibration. That gives us a 90-second window when they're offline. Sergeant Rodriguez studied the diagram.
What about backup power? These guys aren't amateurs. Diesel generators kick in automatically if main power fails, Sarah replied. But there's a 12-second delay while they sync with the building's electrical system.
12 seconds of total darkness if we time it right. Corporal Jackson looked concerned.
12 seconds doesn't sound like much time to move through a secure facility.
It's not, Sarah admitted.
But it's enough to bypass the biometric scanner if we position ourselves correctly beforehand. I've run similar operations in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Trust me on this one.
The submarine's intercom crackled to life.
All personnel, prepare for surface operations. Zodiac teams to stations in 15 minutes.
Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The theoretical phase was ending, soon they would be committed to action. She pulled on her wetsuit and checked her diving equipment one final time. Everything had to be perfect. The Marines around her moved with practiced efficiency, each man focused on his assigned tasks. She noticed how Sergeant Murphy helped Corporal Torres with his gear, and how Rodriguez quietly encouraged the younger Jackson. These men had trained together, fought together, bled together. Sarah was the outsider, but their professionalism was helping bridge that gap. 10 minutes later, the team assembled in the submarine's launch bay.
2 Zodiac boats waited, their engines already running.
The smell of salt water and diesel fuel filled the air as hatches opened to reveal the dark ocean beyond. Remember, Webb said, raising his voice above the engine noise, communication discipline is crucial. Radio silence except for emergencies. If something goes wrong, stick to the contingency plans we rehearsed. Sarah checked her waterproof communication equipment and synchronized her watch with the team's timeline.
Every second would matter once they reached shore. Team Alpha, you're in Zodiac 1, Webb announced. Rodriguez, Jackson, Williams, Torres.
Create your diversion at exactly 0130 hours.
Hold their attention for 15 minutes minimum. The 4 Marines nodded and climbed into the first boat. Sarah watched them disappear into the darkness, their Zodiac quickly swallowed by the night. Team Bravo, mount up, Webb ordered.
Sarah followed Colonel Webb, Sergeant Murphy, and Corporal Santos into the second Zodiac. The boat's powerful engines engaged immediately, pushing them toward the Venezuelan coast at high speed. The ride took 37 minutes through choppy waters. Sarah used the time to review her part of the mission mentally. Once they reached the warehouse, she would have approximately 20 minutes to defeat the security systems and locate the weapons shipment. 20 minutes to prevent advanced military hardware from reaching terrorist hands. As they approached the shoreline, the lights of Caracas became visible in the distance. The port facility appeared as a cluster of bright spots along the coast, its security lighting illuminating massive cranes and shipping containers. There, Webb whispered, pointing toward a dark stretch of beach.
Landing site Bravo.
The Zodiac operator, a young sailor named Petty Officer Hayes, expertly guided their boat toward shore.
Sarah could see the surfline now, white foam visible in the darkness.
The beach appeared empty, but she knew appearances could be deceiving. They hit the sand with a soft thud. Immediately, all 4 team members rolled over the side into knee-deep water, their weapons held high to keep them dry.
Hayes reversed engines and disappeared back into the darkness, leaving them alone on enemy territory.
Sarah followed Webb and the 2 Marines up the beach toward a line of palm trees. The sand was soft under her boots, making movement more difficult than expected. She adjusted her pace to match the Marines, maintaining the spacing they had practiced during rehearsals. "Check in," Webb whispered into his radio.
"Alpha team in position," Rodriguez's voice crackled back.
"Beginning approach to primary target."
"Copy." "Bravo team moving to secondary objective."
They reached the tree line and paused to orient themselves. Sarah pulled out a GPS device and confirmed their position, approximately 800 meters from Warehouse 7. Between them and their target lay an industrial landscape of storage facilities, railway lines, and security patrols.
Webb signaled for the team to move out in single file.
Sarah fell in behind Sergeant Murphy, matching his careful footwork as they navigated between darkened buildings. The smell of diesel fuel and salt water filled the air, mixed with the sense of tropical vegetation.
20 minutes into their approach, they reached the outer perimeter of the warehouse complex.
Sarah studied the facility through her night vision goggles, comparing what she saw with the satellite imagery from their briefings.
Everything matched: guard positions, lighting patterns, patrol routes. "Security cameras?"
Murphy whispered. Sarah pointed to several positions along the warehouse walls.
"For fixed positions, 2 roving patrols. The cameras have a blind spot near the southeast corner. That's our entry point."
Webb checked his watch.
"Alpha team creates diversion in 18 minutes. We need to be in position."
They moved carefully around the perimeter, staying in the shadows cast by nearby buildings.
Sarah's heart rate increased as they drew closer to their objective. Soon, theory would become reality.
The southeast corner of Warehouse 7 was exactly as intelligence had described it, a service entrance protected by a simple electronic lock and a single security camera. The camera faced away from their approach route, creating the blind spot Sarah had identified.
"Motion sensors?" Santos asked quietly.
Sarah studied the area around the door with specialized equipment.
"Clean. Whoever installed this system focused on the main entrances.
They got sloppy with the service areas." Webb smiled grimly. "Their mistake, our advantage."
Sarah moved to the door and examined the electronic lock. It was a standard commercial model, designed more for convenience than security.
She pulled out her electronic toolkit and went to work, her fingers moving quickly over the device's circuits.
"How long?" Webb asked. 3 minutes, Sarah replied, concentrating on her work.
The lock's circuitry was simple, but she needed to bypass it without triggering any alarms.
One wrong connection could alert security to their presence.
In the distance, she could hear the normal sounds of port operations, trucks moving, cranes operating, ships' horns echoing across the water. The noise would help mask any sounds they made, but it also meant they might not hear approaching guards until too late.
"Got it," Sarah whispered as the lock disengaged with a soft click. Webb signaled for Santos to take point as they entered the building.
The warehouse interior was vast and dimly lit, filled with shipping containers and wooden crates stacked 3 high. Emergency lighting provided minimal visibility, creating deep shadows between the storage areas. Sarah consulted her handheld scanner, searching for the specific electromagnetic signature of the military hardware they sought.
The device remained silent as they moved deeper into the facility.
"Vault area should be on the north side," she whispered, leading the team between rows of containers. They had covered approximately half the distance when Santos suddenly raised his fist, signaling the team to freeze. Footsteps echoed from somewhere ahead, accompanied by voices speaking in Spanish. Sarah strained to listen, picking out fragments of conversation. Two men were discussing something about schedules and overtime pay, probably regular security guards making their rounds. She held her breath as the voices grew closer. The guards passed within 10 meters of their position, their flashlights sweeping back and forth between the containers. Sarah pressed herself against a wooden crate, feeling splinters through her tactical gloves. The seconds stretched endlessly as the guards' footsteps slowly faded away. Webb gave the all-clear signal, and they resumed movement toward the vault area. Sarah's scanner began picking up electronic signatures as they approached the north wall of the warehouse. Advanced military electronics generated distinctive electromagnetic patterns that her equipment could detect from considerable distances. "This is it," she whispered, pointing to a reinforced door marked with warning signs in Spanish and English. The vault entrance was everything their intelligence had suggested: biometric scanner, electronic keypad, and what appeared to be pressure-sensitive flooring just inside the doorway. This was where her specialized training would prove its worth. Sarah studied the biometric scanner first. It was a newer model than she had encountered before, but the principles remained the same. Every scanner had vulnerabilities, and this one was no exception. "Timer?" she asked. Webb checked his watch. "For minutes until Alpha creates their diversion. Can you be ready?" "Working on it." Sarah connected her electronic devices to the scanner's input cables, searching for the backdoor access codes that manufacturers often built into their systems. After 90 seconds of careful probing, she found what she was looking for. "Biometrics defeated," she reported. "But the thermal cameras will still be active until they cycle for calibration." "How long until the next cycle?" Murphy asked. Sarah checked her equipment readings. 6 minutes, 17 seconds. "We'll have to wait for Alpha's diversion and the camera reset." The team took defensive positions around the vault entrance while they waited. Sarah used the time to study the pressure-sensitive flooring system, identifying the sensor locations and planning her route through them. "Bravo team, this is Alpha," Rodriguez's voice came through their earpieces. "Beginning diversion in 60 seconds. Webb acknowledged the transmission and signaled his team to prepare. Sarah positioned herself directly in front of the vault door, her hands poised over the biometric scanner. Everything depended on perfect timing now. "Thermal cameras cycling, now," Sarah announced as her equipment detected the calibration sequence beginning. At that exact moment, explosions echoed from the other side of the facility. Alpha Team's diversion had begun, using controlled demolitions to simulate an attack on the main warehouse complex. Immediately, alarm bells began ringing throughout the facility. "Scanners clear," Sarah reported, pressing her palm against the biometric reader. The device accepted her spoofed authorization and disengaged the vault's primary lock. The vault door swung open to reveal a climate-controlled room filled with military hardware. Sarah's scanner immediately identified the target shipment: advanced targeting systems, encrypted communication equipment, and various weapons components, all packed in clearly marked shipping containers. "Jackpot," Webb breathed as he surveyed the contents. But their celebration was short-lived. Heavy footsteps echoed from the main warehouse area, accompanied by shouting voices and the distinctive sound of automatic weapons being readied for action. "Company's coming," Santos reported from his position near the vault entrance. Multiple contacts, heavily armed. Sarah quickly identified the containers holding their target materials. "These 3 crates," she said, pointing to shipping containers marked with specific serial numbers. "Everything else is decoy material." Webb spoke into his radio. "Alpha Team, how's your diversion?" "Keeping them busy," Rodriguez replied, background noise indicating significant combat activity. "But they're starting to organize a response. You've got maybe 10 minutes before they figure out where you really are." The pressure was mounting, but Sarah forced herself to remain calm. Panic would only lead to mistakes, and mistakes could be fatal. She began connecting her electronic equipment to the container's tracking systems, preparing to erase any record of their theft. "Transport?" Murphy asked Webb. "Loading dock on the west side," Webb replied. "But first we need to." He was interrupted by the sound of automatic gunfire much closer than before. Someone had discovered their entry point and was moving to intercept them. "Contact rear," Santos called out urgently. At least 4 armed individuals approaching the vault area. Sarah's hands moved quickly over her equipment as she completed the digital erasure of the container's shipping records. Without those records, tracking the stolen weapons would be nearly impossible. "Done," she announced. "Ready to move." Webb made a quick decision. Murphy, Santos, establish defensive positions. Chen, help me prep these containers for transport. The sound of approaching enemies grew louder as they worked to prepare the stolen weapons for extraction. Sarah could hear Spanish voices calling out coordinates and search patterns. Their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Outside the vault, Murphy and Santos had taken positions that would allow them to defend the entrance while the others completed their mission. Sarah could see the tension in their faces as they prepared for what might be a desperate fighting withdrawal. But, as the daughter of immigrants who had fled war-torn Vietnam, Sarah understood that sometimes standing your ground was the only option. Her parents had taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was doing what needed to be done despite being afraid. The mission was entering its most dangerous phase, and Sarah Chen had no intention of taking a step back. The first burst of gunfire echoed through the warehouse as Santos opened fire on advancing guards. Sarah heard the distinctive crack of his M4 rifle mixing with the heavier reports of AK-47s. The enemy had found them. "Contact front," Murphy called out, his voice steady despite the circumstances. 6 hostiles moving through the container rows. "They know we're here." Webb grabbed one of the weapons crates while Sarah secured her electronic equipment. The stolen military hardware represented months of intelligence work and countless hours of planning. They couldn't leave without it. "Chen, how long to prep these containers for transport?" Webb asked, hefting the surprisingly heavy crate. Sarah quickly examined the remaining containers. Each one was equipped with tracking devices and tamper-evident seals that would need to be disabled. 3 minutes if nobody shoots at me." "Murphy, Santos, buy us 3 minutes," Webb ordered. The 2 Marines moved to flanking positions around the vault entrance, using shipping containers as cover. Sarah could hear them coordinating their fields of fire, ensuring no enemy could approach without being exposed to at least one defender. Sarah forced herself to focus on the technical work despite the gunfire erupting around her. Her hands moved quickly over the electronic systems, disabling GPS tracking devices and removing digital locks that would have prevented the containers from being moved. "Alpha Team, what's your status?" Webb spoke into his radio while keeping watch on the corridor leading to their position. "Still keeping them busy," Rodriguez replied, his voice tight with strain. "But they're bringing up reinforcements. Looks like professional security, not just port guards." That wasn't good news. Professional security meant better training, better equipment, and better coordination. It also meant Petrov's people had been expecting trouble, even if they hadn't known exactly when or where it would come. Sarah finished with the second container and moved to the third. This one contained the most sensitive equipment, encrypted communication systems that could compromise NATO operations if they fell into the wrong hands. She had to be extra careful with the disabling process. "Movement on our 6, Santos called out. "They're trying to flank us through the loading bay." Murphy shifted position to cover the new threat axis. "I see them. 3 individuals with automatic weapons." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. They were outnumbered, surrounded, and running out of time. But Sarah had been in similar situations before, and she had learned to use pressure as a focusing tool rather than a source of panic. "Second container ready," she announced, moving to the final crate. Webb helped her position the container for easier transport. Extraction route? Sarah had studied the warehouse layout extensively during their planning phase. Loading dock Alpha 7 is closest, but they probably have it covered by now. Service door Charlie 3 gives us access to the rail yard. Distance? 200 meters through open ground. Webb grimaced. 200 meters was a long way to carry heavy containers while under fire. But it was their best option given the circumstances. The gunfire intensified as more guards arrived at the scene. Sarah could hear them calling out to each other in Spanish, coordinating their approach. Professional voices, calm and controlled. These weren't frightened security guards, they were experienced fighters.
Contact left, Murphy announced, engaging targets with controlled bursts. They're moving in squads now. Sarah's hands flew over the final container's electronic systems.
The encryption on this one was more sophisticated, requiring a delicate approach to avoid triggering anti-tamper devices.
One wrong move could destroy the very equipment they were trying to steal. Chen, we need to move, Webb urged.
Almost there, Sarah replied, sweat beading on her forehead despite the warehouse's air conditioning. The final sequence required precise timing: disable the tracker, override the movement sensors, then remove the tamper seals in exactly the right order. A burst of automatic fire struck the wall near her head, spraying concrete fragments across her workspace. One of the guards had found an angle that bypassed Murphy's and Santos's defensive positions.
They're in the rafters, Santos called out, redirecting his fire upward.
Sarah forced herself to ignore the bullets whining overhead and complete her work.
Lives depended on preventing these weapons from reaching terrorist hands. Her personal safety was secondary to mission success. Got it, she announced as the final container's systems went dark. All 3 containers ready for transport. Webb immediately began organizing their withdrawal. Murphy, Santos, leapfrog movement to service door Charlie 3.
I'll take point with container 1.
Chen gets container 2.
Murphy and Santos alternate between covering fire and carrying container 3.
It was a solid plan under the circumstances.
They would move in bounds, with some team members providing covering fire while others advanced with the stolen weapons. The Marines' training would be crucial. This was exactly the kind of fighting withdrawal they had practiced countless times.
Alpha team, we're beginning extraction, Webb reported into his radio. Copy that, Rodriguez replied.
We'll maintain our diversion for another 10 minutes, then begin our own withdrawal.
Sarah shouldered her equipment pack and grabbed container 2.
The weapons crate was heavier than expected, but adrenaline gave her the strength she needed. She could carry it the required distance if the others could keep the guards off her back.
Move, Webb ordered.
They emerged from the vault in tactical formation. Webb led with his container, Sarah followed, and Murphy and Santos brought up the rear with the 3rd crate and covering fire. The warehouse had become a maze of muzzle flashes and ricocheting bullets. Sarah kept her head down and focused on maintaining pace with Webb. The service door was 200 meters away, but it might as well have been 2 miles with guards shooting at them from multiple directions. Contact right, Santos called out, engaging targets behind a row of shipping containers. Murphy dropped his end of the 3rd container and returned fire, forcing the guards to take cover.
Go, 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 he shouted to Sarah and Webb.
They sprinted toward the service door while Murphy provided covering fire. Sarah's tactical vest bounced with each step, and her container seemed to grow heavier with every meter. But she maintained her grip and kept moving. Halfway to the door, Webb suddenly stumbled and fell. Sarah immediately dropped her container and moved to help him, seeing blood on his left arm.
Just a graze, Webb insisted, struggling to regain his footing. Keep moving.
But Sarah could see the wound was more serious than he claimed. The bullet had torn through muscle and possibly nicked bone. Webb would need medical attention soon, and carrying a heavy container was now beyond his capabilities. I'll take both containers, Sarah decided, grabbing Webb's crate with her free hand.
Negative, Webb protested. You can't carry both. Watch me. Sarah had trained extensively with heavy loads during SEAL preparation.
The instructors had pushed her harder than her male counterparts, demanding she prove she could meet the same physical standards. Now that training would pay dividends. She positioned both containers for optimal weight distribution and began moving toward the service door. The combined weight was tremendous, but manageable if she maintained proper form and paced her breathing correctly. Behind them, Murphy and Santos were conducting a fighting withdrawal with the 3rd container.
Sarah could hear their weapons firing in controlled bursts, punctuated by the crash of bullets striking metal and concrete.
The Marines were buying time with their own blood and ammunition.
Almost there, Webb encouraged, despite his wounded condition.
He had drawn his sidearm and was scanning for threats Sarah might not see while focused on carrying the containers. The service door appeared ahead, exactly where intelligence had indicated it would be. Sarah's shoulders burned from the weight of the containers, but she forced herself to maintain pace.
200 meters had never seemed so long. Doors locked, Webb announced as they reached the exit. Sarah set down both containers and quickly examined the electronic lock.
It was a different model from the one they had bypassed earlier, but the same principles applied.
Her hands moved over the device's circuits, searching for the override sequence.
"Hurry up," Murphy called from behind them.
"We're running low on ammunition."
Sarah found the lock's vulnerability and exploited it, feeling the mechanism disengage. "Clear." Webb pulled the door open, revealing the rail yard beyond. Freight cars and switching equipment provided excellent cover, but they were still in enemy territory with a long way to go before reaching their extraction point. Murphy and Santos reached the door carrying the third container between them. Santos had taken a bullet in the leg but was still mobile, his face set in grim determination.
"Alpha Team, we're moving to extraction point Bravo," Webb reported as they exited the warehouse.
"Copy," Rodriguez replied.
"We're breaking contact and moving to our extraction point. See you on the boat."
Sarah picked up both her containers again and followed Webb into the rail yard. The weight was becoming unbearable, but she refused to slow down. Marines were counting on her to carry her share of the load, wounded or not. They moved between freight cars, using the massive steel structures as cover from any pursuing guards. Sarah could hear shouts and vehicle engines from the warehouse area, indicating a large-scale search was beginning. There, Webb pointed toward a gap in the perimeter fence.
"That's our route to the beach."
The fence was topped with razor wire and equipped with motion sensors, but Sarah had studied its specifications during mission planning. She knew exactly where the sensors were located and how to avoid triggering them. "Cover me," she instructed, setting down her containers near the fence. Sarah pulled out her electronic tools and went to work on the motion sensor system. The devices were connected to a central control box that could be overridden if you knew the right codes.
Fortunately, she had memorized those codes during her preparation. "Sensors offline," she announced after 30 seconds of work.
Murphy used wire cutters to create a gap in the fence large enough for the team and their containers to pass through. The razor wire curled back like steel flowers, creating a pathway to freedom. "Chen, you're amazing," Santos said as they passed through the gap. His leg wound was bleeding steadily, but he refused assistance. Sarah felt a flush of pride at the Marines' acceptance. They had started this mission as strangers, but combat had forged them into a team. She was no longer an outsider, she was one of them. The beach lay 800 meters ahead, across open ground that offered little concealment. Sarah could see lights moving in the distance as search teams spread out from the warehouse complex. They had maybe 15 minutes before organized pursuit caught up with them. "Final sprint," Webb announced, despite his wounded arm.
"Stay together and watch for ambushes."
Sarah shouldered both containers one last time and began the final leg of their escape. Her body was approaching its limits, but her mind remained focused on the mission.
Those weapons could not fall into terrorist hands.
Behind them, the warehouse burned where Alpha Team's diversion had ignited fuel storage tanks. The orange glow lit up the night sky, creating a beacon visible for miles.
Venezuelan authorities would respond soon, making extraction even more critical.
But Sarah Chen had not come this far to fail now. The female SEAL pressed forward through the darkness, carrying her burden toward the sea and safety beyond. The sand beneath Sarah's boots felt like salvation as the team reached the beach. Her shoulders screamed in protest from carrying both weapons containers across 800 meters of rough terrain, but they had made it. The extraction point lay directly ahead, marked by a barely visible infrared beacon only their night vision equipment could detect. Webb collapsed to one knee as soon as they reached the tree line, his wounded arm finally giving out. Blood had soaked through his tactical vest, and his face was pale in the green glow of Sarah's night vision goggles. "Sir, you need medical attention," Santos insisted, despite his own leg wound.
"After we complete the mission," Webb replied through gritted teeth. "Chen, signal for pickup."
Sarah set down the containers and pulled out her encrypted communication device. The submarine was maintaining position 12 miles offshore, waiting for their extraction call. She keyed the proper frequencies and transmitted the coded message indicating mission success. "Pickup confirmed," she reported after receiving acknowledgement.
"Zodiac's inbound, ETA 12 minutes.
Murphy had taken a defensive position facing inland, his weapon trained on their backtrail. "I can see searchlights moving through the industrial area.
They know we went this way."
The Venezuelan response was faster and more organized than their intelligence estimates had predicted. Professional security teams were coordinating with local authorities, using systematic search patterns that would eventually reach the beach.
Time was running out. "Alpha team status?" Webb asked into his radio. "Moving to extraction point Alpha," Rodriguez replied. "2 wounded, but mobile. We'll make the rendezvous." Sarah felt relief flood through her at hearing Rodriguez's voice.
Alpha Team's diversion had been crucial to their success, but it had also exposed them to significant danger. Knowing they were safe meant the mission was truly succeeding. Santos had fashioned a makeshift bandage for his leg wound using supplies from his medical kit.
"Ma'am, I wanted to say something." "What's that, Corporal?"
When this mission started, some of us had doubts. Not about your qualifications, just about how well we'd work together.
"But you carried your weight and, then, some tonight."
"You carried all our weight when it mattered most."
Sarah nodded her appreciation.
The Marine's acceptance meant more to her than any official commendation could. She had proven herself not just as a SEAL, but as a teammate they could trust in combat. Movement inland, Murphy called softly.
"Vehicles approaching, maybe half a mile out." Sarah used her night vision equipment to scan the area Murphy was watching.
She could see headlights moving along the coastal road, searching for signs of the infiltration team. The search was systematic and professional, definitely not random patrol activity.
"They'll reach this area in maybe 20 minutes, she estimated." Webb checked his watch. "Zodiacs arrive in 10.
We should be clear." But, even as he spoke, new headlights appeared from a different direction. The search teams were converging on their general area, using coordination that suggested military-level training and equipment.
"Sir," Sarah said quietly, "I recommend we move to alternate extraction point Charlie. These guys know their business." Webb considered the suggestion.
Extraction point Charlie was further south along the beach, adding distance but potentially avoiding the organized search. It was a tactical decision that could save their lives or doom them if the timing went wrong.
"Do it," Webb decided. "Murphy, Santos, prep for movement. Chen, signal the course change." Sarah quickly transmitted the new extraction coordinates to the submarine.
The Zodiac operators were experienced at adapting to changing circumstances, but the modification would add risk to an already dangerous operation. They gathered their equipment and began moving south along the beach.
Sarah once again took both weapons containers, ignoring her body's protests.
The containers held technology that could change the balance of power in terrorist hands. Their successful extraction was worth any amount of personal discomfort. The sand was soft and difficult to navigate while carrying heavy loads. Sarah found herself sinking with each step, forcing her to adjust her pace and breathing rhythm. Behind them, the searchlights grew brighter as the pursuit teams reached the original extraction point. "They're at the beach," Murphy reported, watching through his rifle scope.
"Multiple teams with dogs." Dogs changed everything.
No amount of tactical skill could hide their scent trail from properly trained tracking animals. Their window of safety was closing rapidly. There, Santos pointed toward the water.
"Zodiac running lights."
Sarah could barely make out the small boats approaching through the surf. The Zodiac operators were running without navigation lights, using only infrared beacons visible through night vision equipment. Professional boat handling in dangerous conditions.
Signal? Webb asked.
Sarah pulled out her infrared beacon and transmitted the recognition code. The lead Zodiac immediately changed course toward their position, its engines barely audible above the sound of waves hitting the beach.
30 seconds, she announced. The first Zodiac hit the beach just as vehicle headlights appeared along the coastal road behind them.
The timing was perfect, any later and they would have been caught in the open.
Go, 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 Webb ordered.
Murphy and Santos loaded the third weapons container while Sarah struggled with her two. The Zodiac operator, the same young petty officer Hayes who had delivered them, helped pull the containers aboard while keeping his engines running.
Alpha team? Webb asked as they pushed off from the beach.
Right behind you, Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio. Sarah looked back toward shore and saw muzzle flashes appearing along the tree line.
The search teams had found their extraction point and were firing at the departing boats.
Bullets splashed into the water around them, but the Zodiac's speed and the darkness made accurate fire nearly impossible.
The second Zodiac appeared through the surf carrying Alpha team.
Sarah could see Rodriguez and his Marines, their mission also successful despite the intense combat they had endured.
Both teams had accomplished their objectives against professional opposition.
Submarine bearing 090, distance 8 miles, Hayes announced, pointing the Zodiac toward open water. The powerful engines drove them through the waves at high speed, putting distance between them and the Venezuelan coast. Sarah watched the shoreline recede, feeling the mission stress finally beginning to ease. They had done it, prevented advanced weapons from reaching terrorist hands. Chen, Webb said, struggling to be heard above the engine noise.
Outstanding work tonight. I've never seen anyone carry 2 containers that distance under fire. Sarah smiled, feeling genuine pride in her accomplishment. Thank you, sir. The team made it possible.
No, Webb corrected.
You made it possible.
When I went down, you stepped up and carried the load. That's what teammates do.
The ride to the submarine took 43 minutes through choppy seas.
Sarah used the time to secure the weapons containers and ensure their stolen technology remained protected from salt spray. The containers would be transferred to a secure facility for analysis, preventing their contents from ever reaching enemy hands.
The USS Phantom appeared ahead, its dark bulk barely visible against the night sky.
Sarah felt a surge of relief at seeing the submarine's familiar silhouette.
They were almost home.
Bravo team, this is Phantom, came the voice of the submarine's captain. Prepare for recovery operations. The Zodiac pulled alongside the submarine's hull as crew members prepared to receive both the team and their precious cargo. Sarah helped pass up the weapons containers, ensuring each one was properly secured before climbing aboard herself.
Welcome back, the submarine's executive officer greeted them. Medical team is standing by for your wounded. Webb and Santos were immediately taken to the submarine's medical bay for treatment of their wounds.
Sarah followed Murphy and Rodriguez to the debriefing area, where intelligence officers waited to hear their report.
Mission success, Webb announced despite his injured condition. All objectives achieved, all personnel accounted for.
The debrief lasted 2 hours, with each team member providing detailed accounts of their actions during the operation. Sarah found herself describing not just the technical aspects of defeating security systems, but the tactical decisions made under fire. Lieutenant Chen, the intelligence officer, said during her portion of the debrief, "Your performance was exceptional. Carrying both containers while under fire exceeded all reasonable expectations." Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she knew the truth: she had simply done what any SEAL would do in the same situation. The mission came first, personal comfort second. That was the standard she had trained to meet. Later, as the submarine headed toward international waters, Sarah found herself in the mess hall with Rodriguez and Murphy. The Marines were sharing coffee and war stories, their earlier skepticism completely forgotten. "You know," Rodriguez said, "when this started, I wasn't sure how a Navy SEAL would fit with Marines.
Different training, different culture." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now I know that good operators are good operators, regardless of service branch or gender. You proved that tonight. Murphy nodded agreement. My kids are going to hear about this mission someday. How their dad worked with a female SEAL who carried 2 weapons containers under fire. That's the kind of story that inspires people. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction at their words. She had joined the military to serve her country, but moments like this reminded her why the struggle was worthwhile. Every barrier broken made it easier for the next woman to follow. 3 days later, the USS Phantom surfaced in friendly waters and transferred the team to a waiting aircraft. The stolen weapons containers were immediately transported to a secure facility, where experts would analyze their contents and develop countermeasures against similar technology. Sarah's official report would become part of the classified record, documenting how a joint Navy-Marine team had prevented advanced weapons from reaching terrorist hands. But the real story was simpler. 9 professionals had worked together to complete a dangerous mission, proving that excellence transcended traditional boundaries. As their aircraft climbed toward cruising altitude, Sarah looked down at the ocean below. Somewhere in the Middle East, terrorists were waiting for weapons that would never arrive. Somewhere in America, children were sleeping safely because 9 warriors had done their job. Colonel Webb, his arm in a sling but his spirit unbroken, raised a cup of coffee in salute. To teamwork, he announced. To teamwork, the others echoed. Sarah raised her own cup, thinking about the night's events. She had been tested in combat alongside Marines and proven herself worthy of their trust. More importantly, she had demonstrated that gender was irrelevant when lives were on the line. The female SEAL had not taken a step back when the mission demanded everything she had to give. Instead, she had stepped forward, carried the load, and earned her place among America's elite warriors. The mission was complete, but her journey was just beginning. In the months that followed, word of the operation would spread through military circles. Stories would be told of the female SEAL who carried 2 weapons containers under fire, never retreating when her teammates needed her most. Those stories would inspire other women to push their own boundaries, to demand their own chances to serve in combat roles. But, for Sarah Chen, the real reward was simpler: the knowledge that she had served her country with honor, protected innocent lives, and proven that courage came in all forms. The Marines had moved in for the heist, but the female SEAL had never taken a step back. Mission accomplished.